Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Tanner's Favorite Things. I am Tanner Knight, and today we are going to answer a user question. So this question comes from Ludovic Duhail, or Duhail. Hope I got that right. But Ludovic, here's your question. You asked whether this Quilter 101 mini reverb 50 watt amp, it's a head, can it compete with the Marshall head-to-head in any kind of tonal battle? Or more plainly, can you get Marshall-esque tones out of this Quilter with the addition of some pedals? And it's a really good question because if you're not familiar with this Quilter 101 mini reverb, it's a solid state amp. It is an amp head, like I mentioned, so it's its own thing. You got to plug it into a cabinet. But from there, you have any different option of cabinet, a 4x12, a 2x10, a 1x10. You can plug it into any single cabinet that you have, and chances are it's going to be pretty safe and you can play it at a playable volume. It's a really great sounding solid state amp. It's very powerful, 50 watts, like I said, and very high quality sound. So will it compete with the Marshall? Well, I just so happen to have this amp switcher right here. This is a Delisle amp speaker selector, and it's going to allow me to switch between the amps and see if we can kind of replicate the sounds authentically, or semi-close to authentically, good enough in other words. So here we go. I wanted to start with the Marshall. This is kind of the known beast. Everybody knows the Marshall sound, and this is a Marshall Plexi 1987X 50 watt tube head, and it's a pretty revered amplifier in the world of rock and roll and even heavy metal because it really does sound great in a lot of different contexts. So you can see I have my earplugs in. That's because this son of a bitch is loud. Today we're going to plug it into my orange 2x12 cabinet. This is loaded with two Celestion V30 speakers, so a really common and classic sound for both the Marshall and hopefully the Quilter as well. So I'll be switching between the two, and I only have one guitar lead to switch between the two amps, so there'll be a little bit of fudgery to cut the in-betweens, but either way you'll get as good a representation as I can provide for these two amps. Now, I have spent a little bit of time dialing in the sound, and for this Marshall, it's not a dual or 3-channel amp. It's just a friggin' Marshall tube beast, and it does have 4 inputs, and I like to think of the 1 and 2 as the hot and the not so hot lead, but you can get super hot on the 2 just as much as the 1. So, but in my context, I've got 2 down a little below the 2 on the loudness, which for 50 watts, even into a 4x12 or 2 4x12 heads, that gets so loud. But I find it to be really good with the 2x12, and we're on, I don't know, like just below the 2, we'll say. And that'll be our clean sound out of this Marshall head. Then I'm going to switch it to the Quilter to see if we can match that clean sound. Then we'll go into channel 1 on the Marshall, which I have cranked a little higher, up to 4, a little 4.1 maybe. It's loud on channel 1, and it's going to be the full beast, and that's really the rock sound. It's not very heavy metal at 4. If you really wanted to crank it up, you could get a lot more gain out of it, but I'm a little afraid of my ears or this room falling apart, so we're just going to keep it at that. And I think that you'll see that this Quilter amp actually does pretty well against this venerable Marshall head. So let's go ahead and hear what the Marshall sounds like. Let's go into amp number 2 on speaker number 1. So we're down here, and the microphone's capturing the sound out of the cabinet and speakers. I have 2 today. I have an SM57, of course, the Shure stalwart microphone on channel, let's see, 1, I guess, and then on channel 2, I've got a Sennheiser E906, a guitar cabinet specific microphone capturing the sound. And we're just going to blend them together, and that will give you a pretty honest representation of the sound coming out of these speakers. I'm plugged into 2, and it sounds like this. So that's our clean sound out of the Marshall. It's very recognizable, it's full, it's beefy, and yet it's not broken up at all. It's 100% clean. There's no breakup there. Oh, and by the way, speaking of no breakup, the guitar that I'm using is my newest addition to the flock. It's my PRS McCarty 594. This is an S2 variant from Paul Reed Smith. So it's made in the US factory, but made on their higher volume line. So it's cutting a little bit of corners with cost, like these back plates are not recessed, and there's a few other cost-cutting measures, no abalone. But overall, I've been playing this guitar and it haunts my dreams. It is so good. It's so fun to play. It's inspiring. It makes me feel more creative. Makes me feel like I can play anything, even things that I shouldn't be playing. And you know, that's debatable whether I should be or not. But either way, it makes me want to play them, and it sounds really good. So this guitar is going to be providing the tones. It does not have PRS humbuckers in here like you might expect. And hopefully you caught the unboxing of this guitar that I just posted recently, where we determined that these are Lindy Fralin single coil in a humbucker format pickups. And they're kind of boutique-y. They're over $300 list on that set of humbuckers that are actually single coils. But you can tell there's no pull pieces here. It's just a flat set of humbucker sized pickups, but with a single coil flare. So if things sound a little brighter than you might expect, that's probably why. I rolled down the tone just a little bit, but that's what you can expect from this guitar. Really nice, beautiful mahogany, maple top, classic tone woods in a beautiful guitar. So that's what we're going to be playing into the Marshall and the Quilter. I do have a pedal board in between the guitar and the amps, but that's kind of imperative to this test, because the whole question was, can you achieve Marshall-y sounds or tones through use of the Quilter and a pedal board or a pedal? And I think that I have it pretty close. But let's go ahead and hear the clean on the Marshall once again, and then go to the Quilter. Beautiful. One thing you'll notice right away, that the Quilter is much quieter than the Marshall, and I guess, you know, that's to be expected. It's solid state everything. It has a much smaller footprint. It's utilizing a lot less energy and putting out a lot less energy, I think is how that transaction works. I'm not a solid state electrician or expert, so take that with a grain of salt. But either way, this is what the clean sounds like in the Quilter. So one thing you'll notice immediately is the reverb. This thing does have reverb. Let me just kill that just to get a true apples to apples comparison. I don't want you to think that, oh, that one sounds better because it's got a little reverb, because that's a little tricky. So here's clean. Is it identical? No. Is it close enough to my ears? Absolutely. Like, if I heard that sound in a live performance or on a record, I would be happy. I think that that's as close to a tube sounding clean as you can get from a solid state amplifier. So maybe that's not the case anymore, and a lot of these other guys, Line 6 and Boss, have caught up to the solid state modeling technology of Quilter and those kind of boutique brands. But either way, it's pretty interesting, and it makes you ask these questions. Do I need this expensive Marshall head? Of course not. But am I going to sell it? Probably not. No. So the Quilter has very nice clean tones, but that's not why we're here. Of course it's got nice clean tones, that's what it's designed to do, but we're gonna go ahead and add a little dirt and see if we can make it sound as good as this Marshall Plexi 1987X. But first let's hear what that Marshall sounds like with a little dirt. We wanna go 0. We wanna go 2. Like I said, recognizable, excellent, just crunch. I think you could use that for rhythm, or you could even give it a little more volume here. So it's got juice for days, and you could crank it up past 4. You could go to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or even 10 if you are crazy. These speakers can definitely handle it. We have two 30-watt speakers, or I think the V30s are actually 60 watts. So we have 120 watt capacity into that speaker cabinet, theoretically. So I'm just not going to do that for my own ears. But that's a very usable tone in a lot of different contexts. You probably wouldn't want to go heavier than that unless you're doing metal, and again, out of the scope of this video. So let's see if we can recreate that sound on the Quilter. So what did I do to achieve that sound? I added my trusty Boss Super Overdrive SD1. This is actually a pretty new pedal as well on my pedal board, so it's not as trusty as you may think. But I've come to love that pedal, and I think that it's the perfect amount of gain to add to this solid state amp to achieve some Marshall aggressive rhythm, heavy or rock style tones. And it was as simple as bumping up the gain just a hair on the reverb head, the 101 mini reverb, and then I added the Super Overdrive with a level at around, well, let's just bump it up to 50, call it even. The drive is cranked all the way, and then the tone is right at 50%. So once again, that sounds like this. there you go, a little cheapo rock for you, and some ghetto ass riffs to complement both of these amplifiers. So again, both of these amplifiers are high-end kit. The Mini Reverb is much cheaper than the Marshall, but that's not hard to do. Most amplifiers are cheaper than that Marshall Plexi head, and I got it quite a few years ago, and I paid much less than you would pay for it now. So I'm very grateful to have a lot of this gear before these prices went crazy, mostly due to that COVID, that rush to be indoors and learn something new. So anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to accomplish with this video. Of course, there are 1,000 other things that I can do, and you know, I can't leave this video without kicking on the metal zone. And the Marshall is very good with the metal zone, but let's see if we can do a little head-to-head comparison. Marshall v Quilter with the metal zone. Okay, so I went back into channel 2 on the Marshall, so we're essentially in the clean channel. Sounds like that. And I figured the metal zone might be a bit much on channel 1, so let's go ahead and add the metal zone to channel 2 and do a head-to-head with this Quilter. Friggin' juicy, that's metal. So of course you can get metal sounds out of this amplifier by adding that pedal or a number of different preamps or pedals, whatever you want to do here. But let's go ahead and plug in the Quilter, see if we can compare those sounds together. Okay, metal zone. So that's probably way more gain than you thought this thing was capable of cranking out. Of course, it helps to have a beautiful guitar providing that input, and then having a beautiful cabinet with beautiful Celestion speakers plugged in. So all of this is a matter of taste, and you can go any different number of routes for achieving the sound in and out of your amplifier. But do I think that we achieved similar sounds with this Quilter versus the Marshall Plexi 1987X? Yes, I think the answer is yes. So if you're, I don't know, I think that you should have one of these amplifier heads if you like the sound of it. If also you have a need for a secondary amplifier to back up your tube amp, this is a perfect option. And yes, it may seem frivolous having a perfectly good amplifier as a backup, but of course, once you have it, you don't have to use it expressly as a backup. You can plug into it whenever you want. And I've had this one out in my garage for a little bit to do some testing and playing out with some other cabinets that haven't quite made it down here. But I'm going to bring it down here and pepper it into some of these videos a little bit more as we go, just to give both sides of the coin, the solid state versus the tube power rectifiers, etc. So there you have it, Marshall versus Quilter. Of course, the winner is subjective, and your ears will ultimately tell you which you prefer. So hopefully this gave you a little bit of insight, and if you do have any more questions revolving around the Quilter Mini Reverb 101 or the Marshall Plexi 1987X amplifier, or any other gear that I have around here, then let me know and I'll get it on screen for you and get some questions answered. So feel free to like and subscribe if you like this content. That always helps out. And if you do have any requests, of course, feel free to leave them in the comments. So thank you for watching. Once again, I am Tanner Knight, and I hope to see you on the next one.